Hello, everyone. We're going to take a few moments for everyone to join, and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are very excited for this panel for you today. I'm Nick Gorinsky from the Foursquare marketing team, and today I am joined by Emily Owani from Foursquare and Catherine Cullen from the National Retail Federation. Hello, everyone. And let's see here.
Hey, everyone.
Sorry, Emily, I'm going to pass it over to you, okay?
All good. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Owani, and I lead our research and insights team at Foursquare, and I'm excited to be here today.
And hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Cullen. I'm the Vice President for Industry and Consumer Insights at the National Retail Federation, and I'm also very excited to be here today and talk about some exciting research and insights.
Great. Thank you both for joining us today. Our topic of discussion today is the evolution of consumers' in-store journey. There have been several macroeconomic events making headlines over the past few years, including the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain disruption, and rising inflation. Today, we'll dive into how these events have impacted consumers' shopping habits. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Emily and Catherine to tell us a little bit more about their respective organizations and how they partnered together to produce this analysis. I also want to mention, if you have any questions throughout the course of the presentation today, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. For now, Emily and Catherine, thank you again for joining us. I'll pass it over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Nick. So before we dive in, I want to give a high-level overview of how we derive these insights and define some of our key terms. So for those of you who are less familiar with Foursquare, we are the leading geospatial technology platform for deeply understanding places and movement. We analyze consumer behavior based on foot traffic from millions of Americans that make up our always-on panel. And for the purpose of this analysis, all data is aggregated and normalized against US Census data, and that's to remove any age, gender, or geographical bias. So our team has closely studied changes in real-world movement patterns over the past few years to identify emerging trends in consumer behavior and deeply understand the impact of major macroeconomic events, such as rising inflation, or as Nick mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're really excited to partner with Catherine and the NRF team to study the evolution of consumers' in-store journey and identify correlations in our findings to bring forth a really compelling narrative that we're excited to share with you all today. So over to you, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Emily. We're also really excited to do this. It's always really wonderful to be able to combine multiple points of view on the consumer to get a fuller picture of what they're doing. As I mentioned up at the top of the hour, I'm with the National Retail Federation. For those who may not be familiar with us, we are the world's largest retail trade association, and we represent everyone from small mom and pops to mass merchandisers, and we cover trends from what the consumer is doing every day to how technology and AI are changing our industry. Our mission is really to tell the story of the people, the policies, and the ideas that make retail thrive. We have been really excited to work with the Foursquare team on this presentation and on this product. Of course, Emily gave a great overview of the data she's pulling from. We pull from a variety of sources at NRF. The data I will be talking about primarily comes from a partnership with Prosper Insights and Analytics. We work with them to conduct monthly surveys of over 8,000 consumers to keep a pulse on how consumers are feeling and thinking about the broader economy and their shopping, as well as with Affinity Solutions, who captures credit card and debit card transactions for over 100 million cards and representing about 3,000 financial institutions. So we have some great transaction data to provide another perspective on how consumers are feeling and how they're actually acting. That I'll turn it back over to Nick.
Great. Thank you both again for joining us. We have a lot to cover, so let's definitely get started. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic upended our lives, including the way Americans shop. While consumer trends have begun to return to pre-pandemic norms in recent years, inflation has been a hindrance as rising costs have put a strain on American wallets. Catherine, I want to start with you. Can you tell us a bit more about the pandemic or how the pandemic and inflation have altered shopping habits?
Absolutely. Well, as I think we all are aware, there is a lot going on with consumers right now. It feels like we're uh, hopping from one major trend to the next between the pandemic, inflation, all the other broader forces impacting consumers. But one of the things we've been talking a lot about at NRF, and we actually addressed this idea in our annual State of Retail and the Consumer event earlier this spring, is that sort of unexpectedly, a lot of the upheaval that we witnessed during the pandemic does not seem to have fundamentally changed how consumers actually behave and shop. It certainly seems to have poured gasoline on certain trends. We've started seeing certain things accelerate. But a lot of what we're seeing today are trends and issues that were already in play before the pandemic. And a lot of the things that we thought were going to stick around seem to have receded as people have resumed their relatively normal lives and spending habits. And buy online, pickup in store is a great example of this, and it's why we wanted to sort of focus on that with the Foursquare team today. We all know, I think we all lived through this, but when the initial shutdowns went into place, the consumers, of course, shifted a lot of their spending online. Including in some core categories that are historically primarily store-driven, which is grocery. And there we saw an increase in adoption in services like buy online, pick up in store, or curbside. We know a lot of retailers had been investing in these areas and amped up their efforts to really meet consumers where they needed to be during the height of the pandemic. So one thing we wanted to look at was how that has changed as consumers have resumed their normal lives. The data here is from Affinity Solutions. It is a credit card and debit card data that we have been analyzing. And as you can see on this graph, certainly we saw a spike up in the share of grocery sales that occur online during the pandemic, which again is a proxy for us for buy online, pick up in store, or curbside. But it sort of has leveled off. The growth has not continued at that same rate as we saw early in the pandemic. And actually, online grocery still remains a relatively small portion of total grocery sales. It's still around 5.3% of total grocery sales, which is again a very small portion of the category. So I'm going to turn over to Emily, who can talk a little bit more about what they're seeing from a traffic perspective.
Yeah, so we were really interested to find that we have seen dwell time for grocery stores also plateau over the past 3 years, which is consistent with the trend that Catherine just spoke to of online share of grocery sales trending during that time. So to expand on this, median dwell time for grocery stores in the US generally hovered around 17 to 18 minutes in Q1 consistently over the past 3 years. So in other words, Americans have generally been spending less than 20 minutes in store with each grocery trip. So in this chart, we're actually looking at the breakout of total share of grocery store visitation by dwell time. And so not only have Q1 metrics remained mostly consistent over the past 3 years, but we also found that 45% of total grocery trips have lasted 15 minutes or less. So what does that mean? For one, a sustained median dwell time of 17 to 18 minutes over the past 3 years could reflect that many consumers are supplementing in-store grocery shopping with home delivery or subscription services like Instacart or Amazon Fresh or other providers. So when they do go to the store, they aren't picking up as much as they used to and therefore spending less time with each visit. But in addition, and perhaps more interestingly, this trend could also suggest that sustained adoption of buy online, pick up in store or BOPIS lasting well beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly what we're seeing as well, as you pointed out, Emily, that it is a trend that's here to stay. It's one that was growing before the pandemic, but it's not taking over and becoming the only way people shop, as you pointed out. There are consumers who are still going in and spending long amounts of time. And I think the key that we're seeing is that people want choice in how they shop. But we would be remiss in talking about things like buy online, pick up in store, and curbside if we didn't talk about generations. And sort of unsurprisingly, younger consumers are the most likely to say that they are using buy online, pick up in store for grocery. The data on this slide is from our monthly consumer survey that I mentioned. And we asked shoppers, in the last 30 days, have you used this service when shopping for groceries? And as you can see, it fluctuates quite a bit month to month, but the sustained trend does show that younger consumers under the age of 25, which is a lot of that Gen Z cohort, are more likely to use this service when compared to the general population. Now, these consumers are still really early in their lives. This may change as they start to, have kids, start families, do things like that. Certainly, millennials still remained one of the bigger cohorts for this category, and they tend to like choice. But it does show, again, that this service, this usage of buy online, pick up in store definitely has sustained power and is something consumers do like.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting. If we go to the next slide, we found that Gen Z consumers have consistently accounted for fewer than 10% of Q1 grocery store visitors over the past 3 years. So this insight provides further evidence to support what Catherine just spoke to, which is suggesting that that younger generation is less likely to do their grocery shopping in store relative to those older consumers, and therefore more likely to shop online and take advantage of BOPIS offerings. So of course, there are many factors that could explain why this generation makes up such a small fraction of total grocery store visits. For one, Gen Z, also known to be, the digitally native generation, tends to be lower income and less likely to drive compared to older consumers. And so whether it has to do with convenience or accessibility or simply searching for the best price out there, all data points here suggest that these shoppers play a major role in the continued adoption of BOPIS.
Great, thank you both for your insights. So we talked a lot about grocery trends. Catherine, I want to start with you. How have other retail categories been affected by recent macroeconomic events?
Certainly, and it's obviously a big topic, but if we're going to talk about the consumer in 2023, we need to talk about inflation. We know that it's something that has been top of mind for consumers for the past year. We've heard a lot of conversations about raising rates, about trying to put the brakes on consumer spending, and we have seen that financially consumers are in a very different place than they were during the pandemic. I think if we go to the next slide, we have some data on that. Oh, apologies, no, we don't. I'm thinking of something else. Well, just imagine some data on personal savings rates that I will describe for you all. But we know that the personal savings rate really spiked during the pandemic. With lockdowns and shutdowns in place, people really shifted their wallet from spending on services to spending on goods. They also were saving money in other areas of their lives. They benefited from various stimulus programs, and all that meant that there was a lot of money in the economy for consumers to buy things, and we certainly saw that fueling historic rates of growth in retail. Now we are seeing consumers have spent down a fair amount of those savings. I mean, there's a lot of indications that consumers are actually still in a relatively strong position, but the personal savings rate has remained below 5% in recent months, and this is lower than what we saw pre-pandemic when it was about 10%. And all that is saying, consumers just have a little less flexibility in their budget. They're also picking back up on things like travel, spending on services, other areas of their lives. And that means that they are rethinking their budgets. So they are reconsidering how they shop for everyday goods, and they are considering how they can save money on non-essentials as well. So all of that is fueling some interest in the discount sector, which I know Emily is going to cover right now.
Yeah, Catherine brings up some really great points. And to build on that in the next slide, with fewer savings, Americans are really looking for ways to stretch their dollars further, which explains why we've seen a steady increase in visit frequency to discount stores year over year. So in Q1 of 2022, shoppers were visiting discount stores roughly 22% more often than in the year prior. And in Q1 of this year, shoppers were visiting 11% more often than last year. So we actually did an in-depth analysis on the rise of discount shopping over the past few years, and it found that in addition to shopping discount more often, today's discount shoppers are also cutting back on trips to full price retailers like big box and department stores, and also spending less on dining out. So really speaking to what Catherine mentioned about shifting and where they choose to spend. So based on the trend we see here, we suspect that today's shoppers will only continue to visit discount stores and other off-price retailers more often than in the past. In addition, location data also suggests that, if we look on the next slide, female shoppers might be even more sensitive to the impact of inflation compared to male consumers. So in the chart here, we're looking at the distribution of total discount store visits amongst male and female shoppers in Q1 over the past 3 years. And we're seeing that discount retailers' share in in-store traffic from female shoppers has gradually increased year over year, from 49% in Q1 of 2021 up to 55% majority in Q1 of this year. So again, this trend could reflect that women tend to be more responsive to those rising prices and more likely to then change their behavior in order to save.
And if we go to the next slide, this is supported by data that we're seeing again in our monthly survey of consumers. And we've been tracking these questions for a while. We've been asking consumers how they're responding to price increases, and we've seen some really interesting fluctuations since inflation started to climb. But the most common behaviors people as a whole are taking are they are looking to store brand or generic products. They're shopping for sales more often. They may be taking fewer trips or trying to shop closer to home, though those are a little bit more dependent on where gas prices are. And they may be doing more comparative shopping online. But in all of those factors, women over-index when compared to men in terms of the behaviors that they're going to be adopting. So again, as you're thinking about your consumer, as you're thinking about their mindset, it's important to remember who is most likely to be pursuing different avenues, whether that's shopping at a discount store or picking that store brand product off the shelves when they're shopping at a name brand retailer.
Thank you both for this deep dive into the ever-changing shopping habits. It is really truly fascinating. As promised, we have a few questions coming in from our audience. Emily, the first question is coming in for you. Where does Foursquare get its data from? Is it coming from people using the consumer apps?
Yeah, great question. So we are proud of our consumer app origin, but we've evolved over the past 14 years to become the leading geospatial technology platform. So we saw an opportunity for other businesses to benefit from our unique technology. And so that's why we decided to think bigger. So today our tech stack helps businesses use location to make more informed decisions and ultimately drive success. So that means that our understanding of movement comes not only from users of our owned and operated apps like City Guide or Swarm, but also from other apps that are using our unique technology. And our Foursquare only works with location data that is obtained an explicit consumer consent. So once consumers opt in, we have strict processes and policies in place to protect people's privacy as well as our customers and our partners. And we've embedded that privacy protecting feature and put privacy at the forefront of everything we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. And Catherine, it looks like we have a question coming in for you. What are some ways in which grocery and discount retailers can utilize these insights to grow their consumer base?
It's a great question. Thanks, Nick, and whoever submitted this. you know, at the core, it's the fundamentals that have always helped drive retail success that I think are, you know, just as important in today's environment, which is knowing your consumer. But I think something to keep in mind as you look at these insights is that consumer sentiment and behavior is shifting very quickly. And I think because of the pandemic, consumers have become a little less channel loyal and a little less even brand loyal. They are very comfortable switching in response to external stimuli, whether that is higher prices at the gas pump, or it's something like your product isn't available through curbside, so I'm going to go somewhere else where it is. And so I think being ready to meet consumers on every channel and on every platform is even more important than it was before. Even I wouldn't want anyone to walk away from this saying, well, about 5% of grocery sales occur online, so I don't need to worry about buy online, pick up in store. No, that is not the case. We know that younger consumers like this, and consumers are repeat users of this product. And it's something that they value. They want that choice and that option to be available to them. When it comes to discount shoppers, you know, of course, these things also hold true, but keep in mind again that consumers are probably in a little better financial situation than consumer sentiment might indicate. That said, it varies a lot by income level. So really paying attention to how those different income groups and of course demographic groups are shopping in your store, what they care about, and how they're feeling about their jobs and their own situation. That is then going to dictate whether they focus on essentials or whether they splurge on extra items for, say, the upcoming back to school season. And of course, it's important for luxury retailers at the other end to also think about that, since those lower and middle income households are certainly feeling the most pressure right now. And that could eat into their willingness to spend on more accessible luxury categories.
Thank you. Catherine, Emily, thank you so much for joining us for today's discussion. I also want to thank our audience for taking time out of their day to join us. We had a webinar last week with Vistar Media and Outdoor Media Group on what's next for digital out of home, and you can join on demand by finding a link that was just sent in the chat right now. So I definitely encourage everyone to take a peek at that webinar. Catherine, Emily, thank you again, and we will see you at our next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.